The Galactic Empire's fleet hovered in the cold abyss of the contested star system, their ships an imposing reminder of their dominance. Among them, a lone human patrol vessel drifted, its hull marred by laser burns from the Empire's relentless assault. Inside the Empire's command vessel, the air was thick with condescension as Commander Darvar observed the small craft on his holoscreen. "Primitive," he sneered, his mandibles clicking in amusement. "This is the best the humans can muster? Barely worth the fuel expended to capture it." The human ship was pulled into the Empire's docking bay, its doors forced open by Imperial shock troopers. Inside, Captain Elias Kane waited, hands raised, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the chaos around him. The soldiers aimed their weapons, expecting resistance, but Elias simply stepped forward, his sharp eyes taking in every detail of his captors and the ship's interior. Darvar watched the live feed, his smug expression unwavering. "Secure him and bring him to me. A single soldier is hardly a threat." Elias was escorted into the Empire's imposing command center. The room buzzed with alien officers and holographic displays. Despite the tension, Elias exuded an air of composure, his gaze steady as he met Darvar's scornful glare. "You are Elias Kane," Darvar began, his voice dripping with disdain. "A captain, I presume? Or are your ranks as meaningless as your weapons?" Elias tilted his head slightly. "You've done your homework." "I'm flattered." The response drew a murmur from the gathered officers. It was not the submission they expected, and Darvar's mandibles tightened in irritation. He stepped closer, towering over the human. "You will tell us everything about your fleet's movements, their strategies, their weaknesses," Darvar declared. "Your kind is fragile. It won't take long to break you." Elias smirked faintly, a gesture that unsettled more than it reassured. "Fragile? That's the word you're going with." Darvar ignored the jab, dismissing it as bravado. To him, humans were an inferior species, barely above animals, and this one would soon learn his place. Yet, as the minutes ticked by, something about Elias began to gnaw at him. The man's calm wasn't the result of ignorance or fear, it was calculated, as if he were in control despite his chains. Elias's behavior baffled his captors. He complied with their commands, but his movements were deliberate, his eyes always scanning, calculating. He noted the layout of the command deck, the positioning of guards, and the way the officers interacted with their technology. To the Empire, these observations seemed insignificant. To Elias, they were the beginnings of a plan. Darvar addressed his officers, oblivious to the human's subtle maneuvering. "See? He's already cowering. Weaklings like him rely on their technology to survive. Strip them of that, and they're helpless." Elias chuckled softly, drawing the room's attention. "Funny thing about technology," he said, his voice steady. "It's only as strong as the mind using it." The cryptic remark earned a few puzzled glances, but Darvar dismissed it as another attempt at bravado. Still, a seed of doubt began to form. Elias's lack of fear, his measured words, it wasn't the behavior of a broken man. It was the behavior of someone waiting for the right moment. As the interrogation proceeded, Darvar's arrogance blinded him to the danger in front of him. Elias answered questions sparingly, often deflecting with humor or silence, his demeanor unshakable. Darvar interpreted it as stubbornness, but Elias was testing boundaries, gauging reactions, and buying time. The tension in the room grew. Officers whispered among themselves, their confidence wavering as Elias continued to defy expectations. Darvar's frustration mounted. "You seem to misunderstand your position, human," he snapped. "You are a prisoner of the most powerful force in the galaxy. Whatever games you think you're playing will end in failure." Elias's expression remained unchanged. "Powerful, sure. But not infallible." The statement hung in the air, its weight undeniable. For a moment, Darvar faltered, his confidence shaken by the human's unwavering resolve. The Empire was not accustomed to defiance, especially not from a species they deemed inferior. But Elias was not like the others. There was a sharpness to his words, a subtle challenge that hinted at something more. As the guards led Elias back to his holding cell, Darvar tried to dismiss the encounter as irrelevant. Yet unease lingered. The human's cryptic remarks, his calm under pressure, and his uncanny ability to unnerve an entire room, these were not the traits of a defeated soldier. Darvar told himself it was nothing, but deep down, a small voice whispered a warning: this human was not to be underestimated. In his cell, Elias sat against the cold metal wall, his mind racing. The Empire's arrogance was their greatest weakness, and he intended to exploit it. They thought him broken, helpless, a mistake they would soon regret. For now, he would wait, observing and planning, his cryptic words a promise of what was to come. The Empire had captured a soldier, but they had no idea what they had truly unleashed. The interrogation chamber aboard the Imperial dreadnought Oblivion was a stark contrast to the cold steel corridors of the ship. It hummed with the energy of advanced technology, glowing restraints, pulsating neuroprobes, and a web of alien machinery designed to pry open the most stubborn minds. Elias Kane sat in the center, bound by shimmering energy fields, yet his posture was relaxed, his expression unreadable. Commander Darvar stood before him, flanked by his officers and technicians. The alien's imposing frame cast a long shadow across the room, but Elias's gaze was steady, unflinching. "You are alone here, human," Darvar began, his tone a calculated blend of intimidation and disdain. "This room is designed to peel away your defenses, layer by layer, until there is nothing left but truth. Save yourself the pain and speak now." Elias offered a faint smile, his voice calm. "Pain isn't the deterrent you think it is. But please, go ahead. Show me what you've got." Darvar signaled to his technicians. The machinery around Elias whirred to life, its lights dancing across his face. Pulses of energy probed his neural pathways, seeking entry points to his thoughts. The room buzzed with alien frequencies, but Elias remained motionless, his breathing steady. Inside his mind, Elias visualized a fortress, a mental construct fortified by years of military training. He focused on controlled breathing and meditation techniques designed to resist psychological intrusion. The Empire's devices pushed harder, attempting to bypass his defenses, but they met with a wall of mental discipline honed through countless trials. Darvar watched the monitors, his confidence faltering. The human's brain activity displayed an unusual pattern, structured, focused, and unyielding. "Increase the intensity," he barked. The neural probes surged, their efforts growing more aggressive. Elias winced but didn't break. Instead, he focused on the rhythm of his own heartbeat, drowning out the invasive signals. Every surge of energy was met with calculated resistance, his mind bending but never yielding. "Interesting tech," Elias said after a moment, his voice cutting through the hum of the machinery. "But you're going about this all wrong. You assume your tools are infallible, that your prey will always crumble. That's your first mistake." Darvar's mandibles clicked in irritation. "Your bravado is misplaced. This is not a battle you can win." Elias tilted his head, his calm demeanor an act of defiance in itself. "You keep saying win like this is a contest. I didn't come here to play games, Commander. I came here to learn." The statement hung in the air, unsettling the room. Darvar's eyes narrowed as he stepped closer. "Learn what? Your situation is hopeless. You are nothing but a pawn, and pawns are expendable." Elias leaned back slightly, his smirk returning. "Pawns, sure. But even pawns can topple kings if they know where to strike." Darvar's frustration boiled over. He signaled for the AI systems to take over, hoping the impartial logic of machines would succeed where his methods had failed. The holographic display shifted, and a cold, metallic voice filled the room. "Subject resistance detected. Neural pathways recalibrating." The AI launched a new wave of attacks, probing deeper into Elias's mind. Memories flickered at the edges of his consciousness, but he redirected them, offering false trails and meaningless fragments. The technicians furrowed their brows, struggling to make sense of the data. "He's blocking us," one of them muttered. "Redirecting the probes into redundant loops. It's sophisticated." Darvar's mandibles clicked audibly. "Impossible. This primitive shouldn't be capable of such resistance." Elias chuckled softly, the sound cutting through the tension like a blade. Primitive? That's the second mistake. You've built your empire on the assumption that brute force and technology are the ultimate weapons. But you've forgotten the most important one, adaptability. Darvar's frustration turned to unease. Every word from Elias felt like a calculated strike, undermining the Empire's confidence. The human wasn't just resisting, he was turning the interrogation into a psychological battlefield, forcing the Empire to question its own methods. You speak as if you have the upper hand, Darvar growled. But you are still bound, still at our mercy. Elias's eyes gleamed with an unsettling confidence. Am I? Or am I exactly where I want to be? The room fell silent, the weight of his words rippling through the gathered officers. Darvar's paranoia deepened, his mind racing with possibilities. Was this human truly helpless, or had they underestimated him in ways they couldn't yet comprehend? Darvar leaned in, his voice low and menacing. You think you can outwit an empire? You think your defiance will save your people? Elias's smile faded, replaced by a steely resolve. It's not about defiance, Commander. It's about understanding your enemy. And I understand you better than you think. The AI systems began to falter, their readouts displaying errors and inconsistencies. The technicians scrambled to recalibrate, their movements frantic. He's interfering with the probes, one of them reported. The feedback is deliberate. Darvar turned back to Elias, his expression a mix of anger and fear. What are you doing? Elias leaned forward slightly, his voice calm but laced with an edge. I told you, I came here to learn. Your systems, your tactics, your weaknesses. And now I know enough. The tension in the room was palpable. Darvar's arrogance had been replaced by a gnawing dread. The human, bound and outnumbered, had turned their greatest tools against them. And the most unsettling part was the realization that this was all part of his plan. As the interrogation system sputtered and failed, Elias met Darvar's gaze one final time. You thought capturing me was a victory. That's your third and final mistake. Darvar stepped back, his confidence shattered. For the first time, the Empire's infallibility felt like an illusion. They had captured a soldier, but in doing so, they had unleashed something far more dangerous. And the worst part? They had no idea what was coming next. The Oblivion thrummed with the steady hum of its massive engines, a sound that spoke of the Empire's technological might. But within its heart, chaos had begun to brew. Elias Kane, once a seemingly helpless prisoner, was no longer confined by the chains of the Empire's arrogance. He had become the unseen force unraveling their sense of control. From the moment he entered the interrogation chamber, Elias had been working, though not in the way his captors imagined. With every step he took through the dreadnought, he catalogued vulnerabilities. The ship's systems, for all their sophistication, were over-reliant on AI protocols that had predictable patterns. The guards' routines, the encryption on the security doors, the way the officers interacted with their consoles, it all formed a map in Elias's mind, a blueprint for escape. The key to his plan lay beneath the surface, embedded in his body. A neural implant, classified technology from humanity's Special Forces program, allowed Elias to interface directly with electronics. Its true purpose was concealed even from most of his own kind, a failsafe for operatives behind enemy lines. The Empire's rudimentary scans had failed to detect it, another oversight born of their hubris. Through the implant, Elias probed the ship's systems with precision. At first, his actions were subtle, redirecting security cameras, cycling through non-critical subsystems, and causing harmless errors. The minor disruptions went unnoticed by the crew, who dismissed them as standard malfunctions. But these initial tests were vital. They confirmed what Elias already suspected. The Empire had grown complacent, their reliance on automation a glaring weakness. In his mind, flashes of his training surfaced. Weeks spent mastering unconventional warfare, long nights studying alien technology, and grueling simulations designed to prepare operatives for the worst possible scenarios. The memories weren't just reminders of his preparation, they were fuel, igniting his determination. The turning point came when Elias triggered a cascading failure in the ship's environmental systems. Lights flickered across several decks, ventilation cycles disrupted airflow, and minor alarms sounded. The chaos was subtle enough not to raise immediate alarms but enough to sow confusion among the crew. Commander Tharvar paced the command center, his frustration mounting. "Report!" he barked, his voice sharp. "Localized system failures on decks 3 through 5. An officer replied, his hands moving rapidly over a glowing console. "No external threats detected. Likely a malfunction." Tharvar slammed a clawed hand onto the console. "This ship does not malfunction. Find the source." As the crew scrambled to restore order, Elias made his move. The disruptions allowed him to bypass the surveillance systems monitoring his cell. A slight power fluctuation in the energy field holding him captive was all he needed. With practiced precision, Elias manipulated the implant to send a feedback loop into the restraint circuitry, causing it to overload. The field sputtered and died, leaving him free. He moved quickly, disabling the nearest guard with a well-placed strike before arming himself with the alien's weapon. The weapon's sleek design was unfamiliar, but Elias's sharp mind quickly deciphered its basic operation. The corridors of the Oblivion became his hunting ground. He moved silently, using the ship's intricate layout to his advantage. The Empire's arrogance and their ship's impenetrability had led to lax security in certain areas, a mistake Elias exploited ruthlessly. Every action he took was calculated. He left behind subtle clues, an open hatch here, a disabled camera there, designed to mislead the crew and send them in the wrong direction. The psychological toll on the Empire's personnel was evident. As they searched for the source of the escalating chaos, whispers of a ghostly saboteur spread among the ranks. In the command center, Tharvar's composure began to crack. "This is sabotage," he growled, his mandibles clicking in frustration. "The human must be behind this." "But how, Commander?" an officer protested. "He was contained. The security measures were clearly inadequate," Tharvar snapped, cutting him off. "Do you think this is coincidence? Find him." Despite the growing tension, Elias remained calm. His movements were methodical, each step part of a larger strategy. The implant allowed him to monitor the crew's communications, keeping him one step ahead of their search teams. At one point, he overheard an officer's frantic report. "Commander, the environmental systems on Deck 4 are failing again. We've dispatched a team to investigate." Elias smirked, knowing the team would find nothing but more confusion. He was leading them on a wild chase, forcing them to spread their resources thin while he advanced toward his true objective. The turning point came when Elias infiltrated the armory. The weapons and tools stored there were unlike anything he'd seen before, gleaming instruments of war crafted by a species that considered itself unmatched. He wasted no time, selecting the most versatile and powerful equipment available. With each piece of gear he claimed, the balance of power shifted further in his favor. As he prepared to leave the armory, Elias paused, his gaze falling on a console displaying the ship's schematics. His implant interfaced with it, downloading critical data. The schematics revealed vulnerabilities even the crew might not have been aware of. With this knowledge, Elias's escape plan became more than just survival. It became an opportunity to strike a decisive blow against the Empire. The lights flickered once more, a symptom of the chaos Elias had unleashed. In the shadows of the corridor, he moved like a phantom, his presence felt but never seen. The Empire had thought themselves untouchable, their technology and arrogance shielding them from any real threat. But now, their confidence was crumbling, their ship turned against them by a single human soldier. Elias pressed onward, his next move already forming in his mind. The Oblivion had become his battlefield, and he intended to win. The Oblivion no longer felt like the impenetrable fortress it had been just hours before. Its labyrinthine halls, once a symbol of imperial dominance, had become a nightmare for its crew. Darkness crept through the ship as Elias Kane methodically disabled key systems, plunging entire sections into shadow. Lights flickered erratically, airlocks malfunctioned, and the hum of the once flawless engines wavered ominously. The Imperial soldiers, trained for direct confrontations, were ill-prepared for the kind of warfare Elias had unleashed. He moved like a ghost, striking from the shadows with precision. In one moment, a security team would find their calms disrupted. In the next, they'd stumble into an electrified trap rigged from scavenged power cells. Elias turned the very ship against its occupants, exploiting every overlooked vulnerability. Panic spread like wildfire. Soldiers whispered nervously as they patrolled the eerily quiet halls, their footsteps echoing in the void. "Is it just one of them?" a younger officer muttered to his squad. "No one could cause this much damage alone." Darvar's voice crackled through their comms, sharp with irritation. "Hold your positions! He's a single human, not an army. Stop acting like frightened children." But even Darvar's barked orders couldn't restore order. As teams fell victim to Elias's traps, fear took root. It wasn't just the sabotage, it was the knowledge that they were being hunted. No matter where they went, Elias seemed to anticipate their movements, outmaneuvering them with ease. In the shadows, Elias prepared his next strike. He had used the downtime between skirmishes to scavenge supplies, crafting makeshift explosives and setting up diversions. Every move he made was deliberate, designed to spread confusion and keep the crew off balance. His implant fed him data from the ship's compromised systems. He could see the fractured state of the crew, soldiers clustered in small groups, officers bickering over orders, and repair teams overwhelmed by the damage. It was a study in chaos, and Elias knew how to exploit it. At one point, he slipped into a maintenance bay, where two engineers were frantically trying to restore power to a critical subsystem. They never saw him coming. With swift, silent precision, Elias incapacitated them, then rigged their console to overload. Moments later, another section of the ship was plunged into disarray as alarms blared and systems failed. Darvar's frustration reached its peak as he stood in the command deck, his claws digging into the edge of the central console. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "One man cannot bring down a dreadnought. Where are the security teams?" An officer hesitated before replying, his voice trembling. "Commander, several teams have been neutralized. He's using our systems against us. We're stretched too thin." "Then stretch further," Darvar roared. "I will not let this ship be brought to its knees by a human." But no matter how loudly Darvar shouted, the cracks in the Empire's facade were undeniable. Elias's actions were more than just sabotage, they were a demonstration of the Empire's vulnerabilities. Every trap he set, every message he intercepted, reinforced the simple truth: the Empire's overconfidence was their undoing. Elias made his next move by accessing the ship's PA system. His voice, calm and measured, echoed through every corridor and chamber. "Imperials," he began, the word dripping with irony. "You pride yourselves on strength, on dominance. But strength without adaptability? That's a weakness. And dominance built on arrogance? That crumbles the moment it's challenged." The crew froze, their movements halted by the sound of his voice. Even Darvar, for all his bluster, felt a twinge of unease. "You thought capturing me was a victory," Elias continued. "You thought my kind were weak, that we couldn't stand against you. But look around. Your systems are failing, your soldiers are scattered, and your command is unraveling. All because of one human. Imagine what would happen if there were more of us." The message struck at the heart of the Empire's pride. Soldiers exchanged uneasy glances, their confidence wavering. Darvar slammed a fist onto the console, silencing the broadcast, but the damage had already been done. Elias didn't wait for the panic to settle. He pressed his advantage, using his deepening knowledge of the ship to strike key points. A weapons depot was rendered useless after a carefully placed explosive disabled its locking mechanisms. A critical maintenance hub became a choke point when Elias collapsed a section of the ceiling, trapping a squad inside. The crew's morale crumbled further with every move he made. Rumors began to spread. Some claimed Elias had help, others whispered that he wasn't human at all. To them, he was a force of nature, an unstoppable presence that thrived on their fear. In the command deck, Darvar's officers argued over the best course of action. Some suggested abandoning ship, while others pushed for a desperate counteroffensive. Darvar silenced them with a furious glare. "No one is leaving. We will find him, and we will end this." But even as he spoke, Darvar couldn't shake the growing dread. Elias wasn't just targeting systems and personnel, he was targeting the Empire's psyche. The realization hit him like a blow. This wasn't just an escape attempt. This was a message. Elias's final strike brought him to the command deck's outer perimeter. He had maneuvered through the ship with surgical precision, cutting off escape routes and isolating key officers. The dreadnought, once a symbol of Imperial invincibility, now felt like a trap closing in on itself. As the last of the corridors leading to the command deck were sealed, Darvar and his remaining officers found themselves cornered. The tension in the room was suffocating. They could hear the faint hum of systems failing outside, the echoes of Elias's handiwork creeping closer. For the first time, Darvar felt the weight of fear. The hunter had become the hunted, and he realized too late that they had underestimated not just Elias Kane, but humanity itself. The command deck was silent, save for the soft hum of the few remaining operational systems. Elias Kane stepped forward, his figure silhouetted against the sparking consoles and flickering lights. Darvar stood at the center of the room, flanked by his remaining officers, his mandibles twitching in barely restrained fury. For a moment neither spoke, the weight of the confrontation settling over them. Darvar broke the silence, his voice sharp but tinged with an undercurrent of desperation. "You've made your point, human," he said, his claws flexing at his sides. "You've disrupted my ship, humiliated my crew. But this ends now. Surrender, and perhaps I'll show you mercy." Elias's expression remained unreadable, his voice calm and deliberate. "Mercy? Is that what you showed the colonies you destroyed? The prisoners you executed? No, Commander. Mercy isn't your way. But justice? That's mine." Darvar snarled, lunging toward a console to activate the ship's security systems. Before his hand could reach it, Elias fired a single shot from the stolen Imperial weapon, shattering the controls. Sparks flew, and the commander recoiled, rage and fear flashing across his face. "You're out of moves, Darvar," Elias said. "Your ship is failing, your crew is in chaos, and your Empire's arrogance is crumbling around you. You should have known this would happen the moment you underestimated humanity." Darvar's mandibles clicked in frustration. "You think this changes anything? You're one man. The Empire will crush your people under its boot." Elias took a step closer, his gaze unwavering. "You don't understand, do you? This was never about me. It's about what we represent. Resilience. Adaptability. The ability to fight back, no matter the odds. And now, thanks to your hubris, the galaxy will know that humanity isn't weak. We're just getting started." Elias turned his attention to the central console, his implant interfacing with the ship's core systems. Alarms blared as the self-destruct sequence activated, red lights flashing in time with the countdown. The Empire's flagship, the Oblivion, would soon meet its end. Darvar lunged at Elias in a final act of defiance, his claws slashing through the air. Elias sidestepped with practiced ease, delivering a precise blow to the commander's side. Darvar staggered but recovered quickly, his brute strength forcing Elias into a close-quarters struggle. The clash was brutal and swift. Darvar's raw power clashed with Elias's calculated precision, but it was clear who had the upper hand. Elias used the commander's own aggression against him, exploiting openings and striking with surgical accuracy. A final, well-placed strike sent Darvar crashing to the floor, his once commanding presence reduced to a defeated heap. As the ship's systems continued to fail, Elias turned to the surviving officers, who stood frozen in fear. "Leave," he ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Get your crew off this ship. Tell your Empire what happened here. Tell them what happens when they cross humanity." The officers didn't hesitate. They scrambled for the escape pods, their loyalty to the Empire overridden by their instinct for survival. Elias, now alone in the command deck, activated his own escape pod. As he strapped in, he glanced at the console one last time, the countdown ticking closer to 0. With a sharp hiss, the pod launched, propelling him away from the dying dreadnought. From the viewport, Elias watched as the Oblivion was consumed by fire. The explosion rippled through space, a brilliant display of destruction that marked the end of the Empire's flagship. As his pod drifted through the void, Elias activated its communications array. His voice, steady and resolute, carried across open channels. "To the Galactic Empire," he began, his tone a blend of warning and defiance. "Today you learned a lesson you won't forget. Humanity isn't weak. We aren't primitive. And we won't bow to your tyranny. If you come for us again, know this, we'll be ready." The message ended, but its impact would reverberate far beyond the confines of the shattered dreadnought. Survivors of the Oblivion would speak of the lone human who brought down their greatest vessel, of the traps, the tactics, and the words that exposed the Empire's arrogance. Whispers spread through the Empire's ranks, tales of the indomitable human who turned their might against them. Fear crept into their hearts, and for the first time, they began to question their supposed superiority. As Elias's escape pod drifted toward the edge of the system, he leaned back, his mind replaying the events. Humanity's fight was far from over, but this was a start, a declaration that they wouldn't go quietly into the night. And somewhere, deep in the galaxy, the seeds of resistance began to grow. Humanity had been underestimated for the last time,